Hi everyone, my name's Sarah, and today I will be presenting the results of my QI project, which was focused on increasing nurse teaching about hepatic encephalopathy. Here is the table of contents, what we'll be going over today. So first, I will talk about what is hepatic encephalopathy. Then I'll be talking about the needs assessment. How did I come up with this project for my unit? Then the purpose of the QI project, which is to empower every nurse to become an educator. The intervention, which is a beautiful handout I made myself. Outcomes and evaluation. So how effective was this handout in increasing nurse teaching about hepatic encephalopathy? And finally, we'll end with the RN role and future implications for future studies. Introduction. So what is hepatic encephalopathy and why does it matter? Well, hepatic encephalopathy is a reversible worsening of brain function in patients with liver disease. And one of the contributing factors to hepatic encephalopathy is a buildup of ammonia in the blood and the brain. If left untreated, hepatic encephalopathy can lead to coma and death. And one of the key words I want to emphasize here is reversible. This is reversible with proper education, proper interventions. It is reversible. So the cost of hepatic encephalopathy is upwards of $7 billion per year in the United States. And lack of medication adherence and lack of education on prevention are major reasons for readmissions of patients with hepatic encephalopathy. Needs assessment. So according to the CNS on my unit, a lot of patients get readmitted for hepatic encephalopathy because they are not adhering to their medication regime, because they don't know the triggers. In short, because they lack the education on how to manage end-stage liver disease. And while they're waiting for transplant, they're very prone to hepatic encephalopathy. So with her and with the nurse practitioners on my unit, we decided to make a handout for patients that would kind of give them all the info they need to know to prevent hepatic encephalopathy. So that's where the needs assessment came from. It came from talking to the CNS and NP. So as I mentioned, patients and families lack education on how to prevent hepatic encephalopathy. There's currently no protocol for nurses to provide patients education on hepatic encephalopathy, and lack of education has resulted in repeat hospitalizations due to hepatic encephalopathy. Such a long word, huh? So the purpose of my QI project is to empower every nurse to become an educator. This is part of our RN role, is to be educators to our patients and our families. The short-term objective for my 10-week immersion period was to simply increase the number of times nurses teach pre-transplant patients about hepatic encephalopathy, lactulose, how to prevent hepatic encephalopathy. The long-term objective for future study would be to decrease patient readmissions due to hepatic encephalopathy. But due to the time constraint, I focused on the short-term objective. The intervention. So here is my beautiful handout that I made in conjunction with the two nurse practitioners, the CNS, the nutritionist, and my preceptors. And you will see here, there's several sections. So I also did a review of the literature first, and then got input from all of these stakeholders to make this handout. So the first section is about taking lactulose and rifaximin. This is the most important section because lactulose helps pull ammonia from the blood and excrete it. We have a what to eat, what not to eat. Side effects due to lactulose. We have triggers. So if people can avoid the triggers for hepatic encephalopathy, that'd be great. Safety concerns, because people taking lactulose often have to use the bathroom more often. They should be close to a bathroom at all times or make a clear path to the bathroom. What not to do, don't drink, shouldn't do that in general, because it can cause liver damage and hepatic encephalopathy if you already have liver damage. And this is kind of like a titration guide. So like, when should you increase the lactulose dosage? When should you go to the emergency room? When should you just call 911? So Yeah, so I made this in conjunction with several stakeholders, as well as after doing a review of the literature. And we printed out copies for the unit, as well as made laminated copies, so nurses could use it for teaching, as well as hand it out to patients. And just a note, I also announced it during morning and night huddles, probably like 6 huddles in total, as well as sent out an email to all the nurses about it. So outcomes and evaluation. So how did I measure whether this was effective or not? Good question. I did a pre-post test design. So before I gave the handout, I asked nurses 4 questions, which will be shown in the following slides. And after I made the handout and announced it and put it out for them to use, I did a post test with the same 4 questions to measure the efficacy of the intervention on increasing the frequency of nurse teaching about hepatic encephalopathy. And what I found was that the frequency with which nurses taught about hepatic encephalopathy and lactulose administration did indeed increase. But interestingly, confidence levels about teaching remained the same, and number of pre-transplant patients remained the same. So here is a visual representation of what I just said. So the blue is the pre-test, the orange is the post-test. So you can see before the intervention, most people were teaching 1 to 2 times. And then after the intervention, there were more people teaching at least 1 to 2 times, more people teaching 3 to 4 times about hepatic encephalopathy. This bar graph shows the frequency of teaching about lactulose. So you can see before the intervention, there were quite a few that even taught 0 times, but after the intervention, everybody be teaching about lactulose. So that's awesome. That is so awesome. Then here, because this could be a confounding factor, if nurses don't have pre-transplant patients, then obviously they're not going to teach about hepatic encephalopathy. So I wanted to include this question in case to see if there were any, if this would be a confounding factor, but it wasn't, because as you can see, it remained relatively the same pre and post tests of how many pre-transplant patients nurses had. And how confident do nurses feel about teaching hepatic encephalopathy? So you can see here, the confidence levels remained actually exactly the same. This is interesting. I actually administered this survey orally so I could have more opportunity to talk to the nurses. And one of the nurses shared with me, like, she feels plenty confident. It's just that there's no protocol for teaching about hepatic encephalopathy. She didn't know she was supposed to do it. She thought the discharge, thought that at discharge, the transplant coordinator would go over this info. And while everything she said is true, patients are so overloaded at discharge with information that they don't retain all of it. So it's really important to teach them throughout their stay, because as we know, going through nursing school, it takes us more than 1 time to learn something. We got to learn it several times. So with teaching patients, it's no different. So evaluation, the intervention was indeed successful in increasing the frequency of nurse teaching, as evidenced by comparing pre and post data. Nurses were excited to use the handout, and 37 handouts were given in 1 week. I know, because I only made 50 handouts and I counted the remaining ones and there were only 13. So that is awesome. That's really a lot of usage. And I did want to talk about what I realized I could improve on. So I had met with the stakeholders individually to review my handout, and this proved to be a little bit complicated because sometimes different stakeholders would give me conflicting feedback that directly contradicted each other. And so around halfway through my planning process, I decided to call a meeting with all the stakeholders so we could all get on the same page. And I wish I had done that at the onset, because it would have saved me a lot of confusion and headaches. So that's something I would do differently. And I wanted to talk about future studies. Future studies can look at readmission data to see if this handout did indeed reduce the number of readmissions due to hepatic encephalopathy. And at patient surveys, we can survey patient knowledge before and after reading the handout. So that leads me to a brief story. So here's a quote from one of my patients. If I had known about all this before, I wouldn't have gotten so sick. You have no idea how many lives you are going to save with this. So this is a direct quote one of my patients said to me that just really meant a lot, because all I had done was give him the handout, and I had to rush to take care of another patient. And when I came back, this is what he said to me. Um, and he actually, he didn't know that I made the handout, but when he found out, he like started crying. He called his sister. He asked for my autograph. It was the first time I felt like a celebrity, and I was blown away by what a change I could make with just something as simple as a little handout, a little bit of education. Like, he was so grateful, and his mom too. They said they were going to frame it. So you just cannot underestimate the power of educating patients, because it is so empowering for them. They can finally take control of their own health. And a written handout is awesome because they can take it home and look at it over and over, and they won't forget the information on it. So future implications. If I could continue this project, I would want to expand the intervention to other units to see if it has like the same result on other units. On a larger scale, right? I would want to run the intervention for longer to measure patient readmission rates and patient surveys on like patient retention of the education. And so I'm thinking at least that would take a year. Other things I would do if I could is build the education reminders into the electronic work list, because nurses really follow that work list when they're thinking about what to do next. And a daily reminder can help them remember to educate their patients. And I would continue to refine the written education materials, maybe translate it into Spanish, into Chinese. These are all things I would love to do. And I want to talk about the registered nurse and clinical nurse leader role. So RNs are educators. As I mentioned earlier with my story, education empowers patients. It saves lives. It allows patients to take their health, they take control of their own health, because they know what to do. So just don't underestimate this piece of nursing. It's so huge. And then the CNL. So we are trained to be CNLs, and CNLs are change champions. We are the ones who are responsible for creating a culture of quality improvement. And so that starts with being brave enough to start these QI projects, to gather stakeholders, to do all of this. And it can really make a huge difference, to not just do things as they've always been done. And finally, RNs provide compassionate family-centered care. It's important that we educate the patient, but also the family, and remember that this patient is someone's daughter, someone's son, someone's husband, someone's father, and that we take care of the whole family, so that they can really engage in this journey of healing, not alone, but with community. So I just want to leave you with this thought. Nurses are educators. Here are my references. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. And thank you so much. I would like to end with a song that has nothing to do with this presentation, but everything to do with where us Meccans are right now.